Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Gregory DeFreitas. Mike is working, I hope. Good. I'm a professor of economics here, but also more relevantly, I'm the director of the Labor Research Center here, which is called the Center for the Study of Labor and Democracy, which has been around for some 25 plus years. And we're very excited to host this event today, along with our allied program, the Labor Studies program. You might not know it, but you can get a BA at Hofstra now in Labor Studies. It's a great degree if you're interested in all kinds of fields, human resources, journalism, government, or just interested in working with social justice organizations like labor unions, foundations, et cetera. We do a lot of events. But we also publish a journal, one of only about a half dozen journals published at Hofstra called Regional Labor Review, now in its 27th year, one of the oldest journals at Hofstra. So we encourage you to pick this up over in Barnard Hall. We have copies when it comes out. As I said, Labor Studies is the major affiliated with us, and we have a lot of courses. There's a list of courses on the back table. I'm teaching a course, Labor Economics, which is required for the degree, and I welcome all of you if you've had like one course in economics or a course in labor studies, pre-reg for my course. It's on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 in the spring. And I really want to thank those who co-sponsored this event with us to help it make it possible. In particular, the Hofstra Cultural Center, likewise the Political Science Department, the Calico Center, and the Center for Civic Engagement, all of whom have been part of this, just as we were part of the Center for Civic Engagement's Day of Dialogue not that long ago, which tries to get people from different political views, different perspectives, talking about hot-button issues. So today we have a very hot-button issue, right? Originally this event was scheduled for September 18th, but then it literally was postponed due to a political event at Nassau Coliseum down the road when Donald Trump came to headline a rally, and Hofstra decided that, given the traffic, et cetera, we should put off our events. So now, luckily, we managed to reschedule here the week before the election, and we are certainly hoping that all of you have already voted, or if you haven't voted, that you will do so, and also your job isn't finished then. We beg you to reach out to family and friends, have those uncomfortable conversations, because this election really is massively important. Don't let anybody tell you that, oh, the candidates are sort of alike, I'm gonna flip a coin. They're not. There's really no excuse for not recognizing the radical differences between the two parties, and especially on things like work and working people and unions and the like, immigration, which is a hot button, of course, labor topic. And there's I'm an economist, there's massive economic research on the effects of immigration. I'm happy to talk with you about them later on if it comes up in the Q&A, but you'll hear something about it from our speakers as well. So the basic underlying question of this panel is, what are the effects on jobs and incomes and working people's futures, especially young people's futures, of the election that's coming up. Not specifically one candidate or the other. We're trying to keep this as independent as possible, but certainly we hope that you'll listen carefully and you sort out for yourselves what makes sense to you, and absolutely that you'll commit to voting. Next week, if not sooner. So what I'd like to do is turn the floor over to the director of the Labor Studies program to introduce the three wonderful speakers that have taken time out in this busy election season to come speak. So the director of our Labor Studies program is Professor Marianne Trasiati.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks to everybody for coming, and to all the supporting organizations and individuals. And as Professor DeFreitas said, we do have a labor studies major and a minor. It's a really cool interdisciplinary program. We're seeing a lot more interest in the issues that we that we explore in this program: class formation, work, the balance between work and life, the intersection of class, gender, race, religion, nationality, and other things like that, organizing, and union and otherwise among working class people. If these are things that you're interested in, please talk to me. Please pick up a list of our courses at the back of the room. We have a lot of really great offerings next semester, including, I'm really excited, a brand new course on AI. Unfortunately, it's full, so if you haven't registered for it, maybe next time. But there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in the program, and I'm really happy that you're here, and if you're interested, I'd be really happy to talk to you about it. We've got a great lineup of speakers for you today to talk about the White House and working America. What does this election mean for jobs and the economy and democracy? And they come from, they do different things. They come from different sort of worlds, but they all intersect, as you will see in just a moment. I'm going to introduce them in the order in which they will speak. So our first speaker is Ray ZACCARO. Ray is the former head of public affairs and the strategic advisor to the president of the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organizations, Liz Shuler, and Liz is the first woman elected president of the AFL-CIO. He is also a former senior advisor to Jeff Merkley from Oregon, senator, right? Senator Merkley? I don't want to, yes, thank you. Ray, and the former director of the Democratic Caucus Messaging Group for the U.S. House of Representatives. He has also served other members of the House and the Senate, various candidates and campaigns for over 2 decades. And something that makes him near and dear to our heart is that Ray is an alum of Hofstra University, a graduate of the class of 2001. Our second speaker is ONIKA Shepherd. ONIKA is the political director for 1199 SEIU. She does a lot of really great work with organizing healthcare workers on Long Island, and I have the privilege of having been involved, worked with ONIKA on a number of different projects over the last several years, including serving together as board members of Long Island Jobs with Justice. So ONIKA will talk, Ray will give us the perspective, the intersection of politics and labor. ONIKA will talk from the perspective of someone who's organizing on the ground. And then finally, Michael ZWEIG will be our third speaker. He's the founding director of the Center for the Study of Working Class Life at SUNY Stony Brook. He taught for 49 years at Stony Brook. And he has a new book out, Class, Race, and Gender, Challenging the Injuries and Divisions of Capitalism. The foreword is by Reverend William Barber. You may have heard of the Poor People's Campaign. Reverend Barber is a pivotal figure in that campaign. So without further ado, I will bring up our first speaker. Call up Ray, please, to come up. And this is how it's going to work. Our speakers will say a few words, and then maybe take a seat. And then when everyone has spoken, we'll raise the screen, and they will sit up at the table up here, and we'll have a conversation. And please, you are the most important people in this audience, students, so you will get the advantage when it comes to asking questions, and I hope you will. So let's give it up for Ray ZACCARO.
Thank you, everyone. It is fun to be here at my alma mater, and love being at Hofstra. Hofstra is a very important place to me, not just because I went here, but because I would not exist without Hofstra University. My father was a professor here. My mother was a student. Let's not talk about that, but that's how it happened. That's where it all started for me. So, can you believe it? It's here. Election day is here, 6 days away. It's in the moment of countable hours away. It just crept up on us like a Halloween monster, and the syllabus that you are ignoring about your midterms coming up. And I always think it's interesting that Election Day is so near Halloween, because to me, those are the 2 scariest days of the year. And I think Election Day is vastly scarier, particularly this year. It was mentioned earlier, and I'd be remiss not to follow up on it, that this event was initially scheduled for September 18th. And due to the Trump rally, it was mentioned, that was taking place, which effectively shut down this whole area, Nassau Community College and Hofstra University and a lot of Hempstead Turnpike. I thought there was kind of a delicious irony in the fact that a conversation in part about democracy and elections was postponed for an event that was at once an exercise in democracy and featured speakers, and one speaker in particular, as president, was impeached for attempting to undermine and obstruct democracy. I was excited to be here for that. I was disappointed when the event was pulled down, but as a result, I had the unique opportunity, at least unique for me, not unique for thousands of people throughout the country, to attend the Trump rally. I was there working on a project, and I got to speak to a lot of people. I got to speak to a lot of voters who were there that were enthusiastic Trump supporters, and I also got to speak to the people who were there as protesters, who were mostly protesting from the Haitian community shortly after the comments were made about cats and dogs being eaten by Haitian immigrants during the debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. And I learned a lot at that rally, and it was helpful for me, for perspective, for somebody who's spent so much of their lives inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C. I learned that a lot of the issues surrounding this election, as much as we want to make them about policy, are about anxiety on both sides. I also relearned something that I had been observing for quite some time, is that nearly every effort to predict the outcome of this election, every effort to try to understand the election in aggregate terms and the electorate, just comes up empty. When you're in Washington, a lot of times there is a vacuum, and just like the vacuum of space, sound does not necessarily enter or exist. It just is a cacophony of noise that's deafening, and we don't hear anything from the outside coming in. And for the next several days, I think this election cycle is going to continue to be characterized more about what we don't know than what we do know. And despite the breathless, round-the-clock conversations surrounding the election, endless information available at the fingertips of every voter in America, plain facts of historic and current statements and positions of both candidates' actions and policy throughout both of their administrations and well-established political careers at this point, all of the pundits and political prognosticators are unable to get to the real sense of where the electorate really is and what's really driving the voting decisions of that most elusive of categories of voters, working Americans, working class Americans. And I've spent nearly 2 decades in Washington, D.C., and I have advised multiple members of both the House and the Senate, candidates up and down the ticket. I've worked on presidential elections. I've worked on Senate and House elections, gubernatorial elections. The entire Democratic caucus, I advised them on their messaging, and I will tell you that I have come up entirely short when it comes to what to think and how to talk about this election. The best example I could think is playing out before our eyes just the last couple of days. The closing arguments, as the media has taken to calling them. One candidate convened a rally in Madison Square Garden that featured ad hominem attacks and racist attacks on a variety of Americans, a U.S. territory, and even featured speakers who implied that the Vice President of the United States was a prostitute managed by pimps. The other candidate delivered a speech on the ellipse of the National Mall at the scene of the speech that prompted the attack on the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th, and even has become the rallying cry, central organizing principle for her opponent's vast majority of supporters. Didn't hear a lot of conversation, really, about what's happening for working people in this country in that moment. Now, you could dissect both speeches and find material there, but the sense of what's at the core of this conversation seems somewhat mercurial and amorphous. From my perch in the nerve center of the labor movement, in what was called the Year of the Unions, I saw a lot of interesting behaviors from union members and their leadership. And just a few brief numbers to bore you with. Last year, for Labor Day, we conducted a poll that showed 88% of Americans, 18 to 30-year-olds, it's your generation, most of you, supported enthusiastically labor unions and the labor movement. And that's a pretty coveted space, right? Every politician in the world wants to be cool They want to be accepted and supported and encouraged by young people. North of 70% of Americans, between 71 and 75% of Americans, also enthusiastically support labor unions and the labor movement. When I saw those numbers, and I knew at the time, working for the labor movement, that the Biden administration had just delivered the most pro-labor, pro-worker agenda of any administration basically since FDR. Granted, it was a different moment of the campaign, right? We thought President Biden was going to be running for re-election at that moment. But as has been the pattern and as should be, the vice president is deeply associated with that administration, with her administration. And I thought, well, yeah, this is in the bag. Americans love labor, Biden loves labor loves Biden. There we go. But as we know, those two things didn't necessarily go together. And here's another thought. When Donald Trump was president, he allowed the National Labor Relations Board to wither on the vine by not filling vacancies. He tried to strip the National Labor Relations Act, core organizing principle of the labor movement, and appointed judges throughout the spectrum with deep ideological opposition to unions, the labor movement, and track records of actually opposing them in court. As a businessman, he was notorious for trying to find workarounds for hiring labor union workers. And as a candidate, he said that striking workers should be fired and laughed about it with Elon Musk. But within unions, union members, polled union members, more than 40% of union members have said they would support Trump and the MAGA agenda. I have a personal anecdote about this, and I'll just bore you with it for a second, and conscious of time. We're having a yard sale at my mom's house in North Babylon, and one of the people that pulled up in a 1963 Dodge Dart, so of course I had to go talk to him because I'm a car guy. And I noticed that on this beautifully restored car was a Trump bumper sticker. And anybody who's ever done anything with the restoration of classic cars, like the last thing you want to do is put a bumper sticker on it. I don't care who it's for. And you know, he said, "You want to come check it out?" And as I got closer, I saw the bumper sticker, and I noticed when he lifted the hood, he was wearing Trump bracelets. And I was, you know, not thinking anything of it. I'm like, whatever. And he asked for my contact information, so I gave him my AFL-CIO business card because it had my cell phone on it. And thought maybe we'd talk cars. And he said, "Oh, are you in a union?" I said, "No, but I work for the unions, all of them, pretty much." And he said, "I'm a retired Teamster, 22 years. I'm the retiree rep for the local." And I couldn't help myself. So I asked him, "Can I ask you a simple question?" And I do not want to have a political argument with you. I just want to ask you a question. You're so enthusiastic about unions, and you so deeply support unions, and it's part of your life. It's how you identify yourself. It's the first thing you told me about yourself when we got personal beyond the car. Are you not concerned about supporting a candidate who wants to dismantle the labor movement, who thinks that union striking workers should be fired?" His response to me is, "I've never heard that before." Which gets me to another really interesting moment of this election, which is that media landscape and the way that we talk about candidates, these particular candidates, is a little bit off. And we can get into the rationale of why a labor movement that's still very white and male in a lot of ways is susceptible to a lot of the rhetoric around masculinity and some of the nativist arguments and protectionist arguments that have been on the record throughout the campaign, that have been kind of core to the Trump campaign. But a tariff plan that will likely bring harm to working families by increasing costs across the board, and an effort to dismantle the labor movement seems contradictory. And here's this reasonably informed voter who is so informed about the circumstances surrounding his support of labor movements, that he's an activist who did not know that track record. And what I think it gets down to, at least in part, is this self-selection of information. There are 16 million union members in the United States. and to the point about how misleading it is to think of the union and the labor movement as being white and male and stale, is that the highest number of new union members are women, are Black and Latino workers, and the three heads of the major national non-affiliated AFL-CIO, the AFL-CIO president and secretary treasurer are a woman and a Black man. The president of the National Education Association is a Black woman. The president of the SEIU is a Black woman. So perception and self-selection and what we actually see and what we want to see are two different things, and I think that nothing has played into that more than the way we peruse social media. And as my father used to say, sometimes in making a decision there's a lapse in the synapses. And when we have, I don't expect anybody here to make their voting decisions based on the Washington Post or the LA Times endorsements, but when major institutions of media who are supposed to offer a little bit of clarity, a little bit of a cool mind, and supposedly an objective point of view about the circumstances and the individuals running for office, when they sit out an election, it proves one thing for sure, which is you can really buy anything on Amazon. So all of these things together lead us to this place where I have nothing I can tell you about what's going to happen in 6 days. None of us do. This is a strange time. This is a strange election. And so much of it seems contradictory. But what I learned at that Trump rally when we were supposed to be here was that it is deeply personal. And it is full of decision that voting in this election is full of anguish and anxiety for American voters on both sides. And that's a really difficult place to be for a democracy. And one more thing I'll say about the labor movement is that there is no more small d democratic organization or facet of American life than unions. Every decision that is made in a union is made democratically in a union hall, and even the decision to join a union is a democratic, small d, democracy decision. Threats to the erosion of democracy, threats to the erosion of the labor movement result in anxiety around all of it. And the scariest statistic I will leave you with today is this. More than 50% of Americans right now do not believe that democracy is serving them. Not our democracy, not America's version of democracy. Democracy as a concept is not serving the American people, more than half of people. As somebody who has practiced political rhetoric from the time I was here at Hofstra University to this current day, I'm confounded by the fact that that message is working. So I hope everybody here voted. If you didn't vote early, then vote. It's literally the only power you have right now. And it'll make a huge difference, especially here on Long Island. So thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Next, I'd like to invite ONIKA up.
Yeah, I think let me put it in, but hi everyone, good afternoon. How are we doing today? Oh, you guys are really quiet. You got to do better than that. How are you doing today? Okay, good, great. I'd like to hear great. My name is ONIKA Shepherd, and thank you, Ann, for that great introduction. Yes, we have been working together for many years. I have been working in the labor movement for 20-something years. I started out at 1199 in 2002 as an organizer. And my job was to get people to come into a union, was to join a union across the country. And so had the pleasure of doing that work for 10 to 15 years and did a great, I think, and I first kind of encountered was organizing home care workers out here on Long Island when we had to raise healthcare worker density out here on the island. And so came out here, build density and workers power, and then decided that not only do our members care about what's happening in their jobs, they also care what's happening in their community. And happy to be part of a union who is kind of shaping that work. I do have a PowerPoint, but I can go ahead and just kind of talk through it if that's helped. Yeah, and I emailed it to you too. I had emailed it to you too if that was better. If you can pull it up when you email. Because I'm not sure if it's there. But the economy and the White House, 1199 vision, I just want to kind of share that. So we're a powerful voice in healthcare, as I stated. We represent over 450,000 members across 5 states in Washington, D.C. So we are in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. I'll keep that one last. Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Florida. We represent and is part of the labor movement and everybody there in Florida. So don't say it. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We can do this all together. I don't like tech. And so I'll continue, and don't worry about the slides. You get to guys ask this question, and I'll work through it on my phone, or I can email it to you if you think it's better, if it's not there. So not only do we represent, here's who we represent. So 1199 represents the full care team. So when I talk about the full care team in healthcare, I'm talking not only about the nurses, we're talking about the CNAs, we're talking dietary, housekeeping, everybody from top to bottom in that hospital or nursing home, we represent the workers there. We also represent workers in community help. We represent Rite Aid workers. When you go to the pharmacy and you pick up a prescription, the person that's standing behind and that has offered you that Farmers is probably an 1199 member. And so we represent all spectrum and across all the healthcare pieces. We also have, I want to talk about our strong, which we really, really are very proud of, our social justice footprint. We are happy and we are excited to always be strong in social justice. And we also always is very proud of framing what we do in healthcare, positively changing where we are and who we are in healthcare. Here's where our members in this conversation around democracy and who we are and how we show up in some of the spaces. We often, as most unions do, talk to our members. And when we say to our members, what do you want as your union to take on in 2025, right? How do we go to the political leaders and take on this leadership? And here's what our members say are some of their top issues. And one of them, I think the New York Times hadn't exactly, was sharing that this is not the top of the conversation in the debate around that are having right now. So we have healthcare, affordable healthcare. That is one of the top issues for our members. And we fight for the accessibility to healthcare, quality healthcare for all, and making sure that, and everybody should know this and you should recognize this, when union members fight, they're fighting for everyone across the standard. They are setting standards for everyone. Well, yep, it'll work. We'll do this. I think I am somewhere near. Talked about who we represent. There we are. And then secondly, just because of what's happening, and when you talk about economy, you can't not stop talking about housing. Our members care about housing. It does not matter where you live. And I can tell you, because I get the responsibility of going to talk to the members who live out in the Hamptons. And they are talking to me about housing. They are talking to me, and not they live in Riverhead, they are talking to me about housing. And so they often want me to remind people that not everybody in the Hamptons live in million-dollar mansions and homes, that they're talking about how do we get subsidies, how do I purchase a home, as you all will be talking about and want to know, because it's going to come a point in time where you're like, I want to own something like my grandma did, my grandpa, even my dad and my mom. What does that look like? And how do we kind of shape the economy that help you do that? The other big thing, and so our members were, when COVID hit, as we all called them heroes and clapped for them, they were all talking about moratorium on housing, right? How do we not get evicted from our housing? And so, which is why we take on those issues, not only in New York City, but everywhere where we are in the rooms and having conversation about how do we shape housing, how we shape the conversation about housing, how do we talk about accessibility, not only in the federal conversation, but in our states and definitely in our local government. We will also kind of fair wages. And one of the things that you often talk about when you talk about unions, and everybody has, I mean, it used to be, as Mike will point out, that when you were in the union, it was very clear you were part of the middle class. People were proud to be a union member and in the middle class. That is no longer what's happening. That's not what it feels like for our members. And so, yes, they all have jobs. They are working, and these are people that are doing this regardless of whether or not the paycheck at the end of the week is paying for all the expenses, as so often everybody kind of is talking about. But when we talk about raising wages and raising standards, we're doing that across the board. And you should all know, when a union contract gets a raise, it means everybody in the surrounding area kind of have to start getting a raise too. So when we talk about, we were part and definitely SEIU in leading the charge in Fight for 15, a few years ago. Doesn't seems like not such a long time ago, but it was a couple of years ago. And that's because this national conversation about raising the minimum wage is something that's very important in how you take and get people into the middle class, getting people to affordable jobs. Who can tell me what's the federal minimum wage? $7.25. Did everybody hear that? $7.25. Who can tell me what they can buy for $7.25? A sandwich? Yeah. A what? A chops. Good. Starbucks drink? Can you get something with Starbucks for $7? I mean, I know it's like maybe it's the black coffee. What are we getting from Starbucks for $7? The pop. I think it's the I like that. Yeah, it's the little bread on top of the little pop that you get sell for $5. Don't ask me why I know that. I won't admit anything. And then another one of the things that our members have talked about is childcare. Everybody across, and this is one of the issues that we have seen, we understood in coming out of a pandemic, that when people got stimulus checks, it didn't matter whether you were a Democrat or a Republican. Everybody cared that you got a check that talked about how to take care of your family, right? That conversation around childcare, which is also in the conversation and in the debate, was something that generally came out. And we have found it when we talk to our members in Hudson Valley and 1199, as you should know, I talked about the Hamptons. We're also probably a few houses from the border of Canada. That's how extensive our membership reach. And so when we talk to members in those communities we have facilities where people are saying, I'm a Republican, here's what I'm doing. I'm a Democrat, here's what I'm doing. Everybody talked about the fact that the stimulus checks that they got during the pandemic impacted their lives. Everybody talked about getting more money in their paychecks, and what does that look like? And so we're making sure that we are electing and talking to people who are kind of also doing that. We generally talk also about protecting our rights. And when I talk about rights, I'm talking about across the board. It does not matter who you are, what you do. And my previous panelists talked about voting. The thing that you take really lightly about walking into a polling location and voting is something that somebody has lost their lives for. And it's not in the front of us, it's not part of our history if you're not a history buff. It is a right that has been fought for. You should use it, utilize it. It is yours. And so want to make sure that we're always in the conversation about protecting everyone's rights and peace. And so I am going to go a little faster. Oh. Oh, that's all you're seeing? Yeah. Oh, so the slide with all these people here are just like, All right. That's okay. We'll just keep going and act like I can always email it to you if you like. And I'll continue. So affordable healthcare, we talk about access to care and funding the healthcare system. This is what we do. We talk about Medicare, Medicaid. The slide has us in Albany, and when we show up in Albany, got it. That was our last. Yep.
This one?
Yep.
Okay.
Affordable healthcare. Got it.
Yeah, that should be.
That was just a trip to see the governor. When we talk about healthcare in New York, that was just a trip with a few hundreds of our members across the entire state, going to tell the governor why they should not cut healthcare in New York. And so we understand. And we want you to know that when you do that, when our members do that for your hospital, whichever hospital that you're next to, and I can often talk about the relationship that we have with the Northwells and the NYUs and the Mount Sinai, whatever hospital system it is, at this point there are systems on the island, we are talking about how to fund healthcare. How to fund healthcare for the average person that walks through the door that doesn't ordinarily have a union contract to cover that healthcare. And our members also who, especially who works in our hospitals, don't believe that they should pay for their healthcare, nor you should pay for your healthcare. That people should be able to go to the doctor and be able to not decide whether they should pick up the prescription after the doctor visit or buy food. That's a right that you deserve, and that we're making sure that we can fight for that every bit where we can. I listed our training and path to healthcare. One of the things that we learned was after COVID, as you can imagine, everybody kind of reconsidered whether or not they should continue to do and be in healthcare. And so we've got a few $1 million from the governor to replenish the healthcare industry, so to speak. We are on a path of making sure that they are skilled and able workers in our institutions. As you go to get care, we want to make sure that that's staffed up properly. And so we're making sure that we are part of that and in that end. So let me see if this works again. Yep, it moved to something. Good. Because believe it or not, it didn't move for me. So the next kind of piece that I want to kind of share around our priorities and we have like a multifaceted approach to kind of how we do this work. 1199 is one of the unions that we have what's called a Lee contract. It's a major contract. It's a contract in where all 47 hospitals in New York State are part of the same contract. The members negotiate all at the same time. And so That's talking about whether or not you're in the Northwell down the street in New Hyde Park, or whether or not you're in Lenox Hill, you generally have the same union contract. And so that's something in terms of, I want to talk about that in terms of our power and what you're able to do when you're able to do collectively. Like, those of us that work in the union understand the power of the collective and the impact it has. And so that's one of the ways that we're able to do it. So policies and legislation, advocating for worker-friendly policies locally and federally is what we also do. And then organizing through mobilization and grassroots. And so we are leveraging our political power, as we often do in the spaces that we do, in order to shape our the community and the work that we do and the policies that we do. So I am going to, and then one last, as I will probably tell you, let me go to tell you who we're actually supporting. I don't know what's happening, but we are 1199. SEIU has endorsed Vice President Harris for president, and we are doing everything that we can in order to make sure that we are seeing that work through, and that is that she is elected not only the first woman, but also the reasons why our members choose to go with Vice President Harris is because her values align with the work that we want to be able to do and the work that we see. And one of the things, and so your story about the retirees, I want to share that that's our secret weapon. You don't get to say that too often, is because we've got our retirees in Florida. We're calling and knocking doors, getting people to turn out for Harris. We've got retirees in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, as we will go out and do. And so we are doing everything in this election cycle in order to make sure that not only our candidate that we support in the White House, but also the congressional seats. There are 3 candidates on Long Island that we're endorsing. Laura Gillen in this district is somebody that we are behind and supporting and doing everything to kind of get out. And so I will stop there, and I will prepare for your questions. So thank you.
Thanks, ONIKA. Michael?
Well, good day, and good to be with you all. I am Michael Zweig. It is true, and I do have a book. It's sitting in the back there called Class, Race, and Gender, Challenging the Injuries and Divisions of Capitalism. And what I'm going to be saying here is drawn out of this book. So if you want to know more or you want to think about it a little bit more, it's available for you there, and I'll be in the back if anybody wants. I can sign it. But let's get to the substance of the matter here. We're talking about an election, and Donald Trump is obviously a controversial figure. The word fascism has been associated with him. It's interesting that that was a claim that was made on the left in the Democratic Party and to the left of the Democratic Party quite a while ago, that Donald Trump represented a fascist direction in this country. And the Democratic Party leadership in the Harris campaign was very reluctant to go that way. They were very reluctant to take up that word because it carries so much freight. But I want to be here today to drill down into that claim. Now, Trump talks a lot about Hitler, and people make that connection in various different kinds of ways. But I want to say that fascism is not just nationalism. It's not just an ultra-nationalistic sense of my country over every other country. That's a characteristic, but that's not what fascism is. Fascism is not racism. Racism is part of fascism, but you can be a racist up and down and not be a fascist. Fascism is something more. It's more profound even than that. Fascism is not about having women go have babies and stay home, although fascists and fascist movements promote that. But that's not what fascism is. Fascism is not about authoritarian rule. There's a lot of times people associate Trump with fascism because, oh, he's for an authoritarian strong leader, and fascists are for that too. That's not what fascism is, although it contains that. What fascism is a dedicated attempt by the people who run the country as capitalists to destroy the labor movement, to destroy the power of workers. That is the core and essence of what fascism is, and the use of the state and the use of all the propaganda apparatus to destroy the power of working people and to subordinate working people to the interests of capitalist class. That is what fascism has been. And that is what Donald Trump represents. Donald Trump has his billionaires giving him money. Donald Trump claims he's a billionaire. We don't have any idea. He's such a bullshit artist, we don't know what is true from what he says and what he doesn't say. But we do know that when he sits down with Elon Musk and says, you are right to try to fire the people who go on strike, that's illegal in this country, incidentally, but that is the fascist mentality of using the power of capital and using the power of the state to tell workers, sit down and shut up and go to work and don't come and talk to me about anything else because I'm the boss. In 1972, 1973, there was a guy named Willie Farah, F-A-R-A-H. Willie Farah had a series of garment factories around the country. And he made, his companies made pants, Farah pants, like Dockers. He had a lot of workers on strike in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And he went to those workers, and those were mostly Mexican women. And he said to them, when they were on strike and they had a rally, he wanted to talk to them. And you know what he said to them? Go back to work, because without me, you are nothing. That's what he said. 22 months later, he was nothing because they won that strike. What fascism is about and what Donald Trump represents is the destruction of the labor movement, the destruction of the lives of working people. And it didn't just fall out of the sky. Now, I just want to, before I do just a little bit of history, anybody here know, I mean, we're talking about Hitler. When did Hitler come to power? 1933. What month? January 1933, correct. Write that down, know that date. Hitler and fascism is associated with concentration camps, right? Everybody here knows that. When was the first concentration camp built? April. What year? 1933. And what was that concentration camp called? Dachau in Bavaria. It's still there, Dachau, it's a city. And who was first put into that camp? Who was arrested and put into the first concentration camp that Hitler built? Union organizers. Not Jews, union organizers who were Jews, but that was incidental. Jews came later. The first thing was, let's get rid of the union organizers, the socialists, the communists, the workers who had an identity as workers, and we're going to have the power to push back against the capitalist class that was running Germany. That's what fascism was about. Now, you know, What happened to the Japanese in the United States in 1942? They put in internment camps, right? And the Japanese who were put into those camps said, wait a minute, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. What did the Supreme Court decide? Anybody know? Yeah, you can put them in those camps. And what was the decision? It had a name, like Roe versus, that. We can talk about all the names have decisions. Decisions have names. Karamatsu, that was the decision. Do you want to know something? That decision has never been reversed. That decision today is the law of the land. This guy, Donald Trump, wants to arrest migrant workers, immigrant workers, and put them into camps. He says so. He actually says that. And you want to know what? It's legal in this country to do that, according to Karamatsu, which was never reversed. And you think that Alito's going to reverse it? I'm not so sure. You want to take a chance? I don't think that's a good bet. We got to listen to what this man is saying and who he represents. And now I want to talk about who he represents. Because this is not just one lunatic, one jerk, or one person you can laugh at or get disgusted with. Now, most of you don't remember a whole lot about what was going on in 1963, 1970, 1972. You know we have a Clean Water Act? We have a Clean Air Act? We have Occupational Safety and Health Act? You know when those acts were passed? In the late 1960s and early 1970s. Who signed those laws into effect? Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act. He signed OSHA. And at that time, in the late 60s and early 70s, capitalism was in ill repute in this country. It's hard to imagine, and for those of us who were part of it, it's hard to remember. But capitalism was in ill repute. It had bad odor in this country. And the capitalists were very worried about that. They didn't know what to do about it. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce hired a guy to help them sort this through. Mr. ZACCARO here does kind of political work for the labor movement. Lewis Powell did that kind of political work for the ruling class. And he wrote a memorandum, the Powell Memorandum, that was brought to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in 1971. And Lewis Powell was a white shoe law lawyer from Richmond, Virginia. And here's what he said. He was very smart. He said, you know what? He's talking to the Chamber of Commerce. You all represent different industries. The auto industry, gas and oil, whichever. And you all go and lobby for your own companies, for your own industries. You all go and get the best legislation you can for autos or for this or that. That's good. We have to do that. But you know what? It's not enough. Because if we only go industry by industry, we're going to lose. Because look, we are being challenged in every university, in every church pulpit, in every religious synagogue, in every court, in every university and classroom. Capital is under attack. Not the auto industry, not this industry or that industry, but capital is under attack. And we have to merge our resources as a class and go and fight that overall battle and pool our resources in order to challenge the challenge that we face. The challenge that we face going all the way back to the New Deal that got us Social Security, that got us the National Labor Relations Act. We have to fight to reverse all of that. And to do that, we have to do that as a collective for the system. And you know what? They did it. When did the Cato Institute get started? In the 1970s. The Federalist Society that got us the Supreme Court in the 1970s. The Heritage Foundation, you heard of Project 2025? When did the Heritage Foundation get set up? 1974, after Powell's memorandum that set a strategy for the corporate elite of this country. And those people are dedicated to taking back every concession that they had to make from the New Deal forward. That's what they're about. And now they have Trump as their spokesperson. Now I want to come back to Hitler for a minute. The German ruling class thought Hitler was great. Oh, they thought he was nuts. They didn't like him, but they pushed him because they thought they could control him. They pushed him because they thought that he could get their interests, but they could control him. Didn't work out so good. Didn't work out so good at all. Because as soon as any one of them said no to Hitler, after Hitler was in power, they were out. Because that's where the authoritarian ruler comes into play. Donald Trump is an instrument not of some craziness. He's an instrument of the ruling class of this country. And they don't know quite what to do with him. They're a little afraid of him. They're a little not so sure. So they got Liz Cheney coming out here saying, oh my God, we got to do something. But Jamie Dimon's going to vote for him. You know, they think that that Trump represents this opportunity to carry forward that agenda that goes all the way back to the Powell Memorandum and all the way back to the battles of the New Deal. And that's what we're fighting. That's what we're dealing with. And so when you go and vote, you vote what you want, but that's the environment that we're in. And that environment is not just an electoral environment. That environment is the full scale of what we're learning in school, of how we organize our church services. Everything is part of that struggle. And that's what's going on 6 days from today, and that's why we're a little bit nervous, some of us who think about fascism. So we'll go from that, and like I say, this book is in the back. If you're interested, you can get some more about it. But when they talk about vermin, they're talking about us.
I'm going to invite our panelists up to the stage so we can take some questions. Students, if you have questions, please line up to the mic. And faculty and community members are welcome to ask questions too, but I'm going to give priority to the students. So I encourage you, and please do speak into the mic since this is being recorded. First, can we give a round of applause to our panelists for their insightful and provocative observations?
Only happens usually on the other side. Let's see.
Go ahead.
Okay. Where am I supposed to be? There, right here. Hello, my name is Thomas.
Hey, Thomas.
I would love to ask you a question about the election. So I want to preface this by saying that I am a campaign intern. I've done a lot of work for campaigns, knocking on doors, answering phone calls, stuff like that. And I've already voted early, so I feel that I've done my part for the election, and therefore, in that way, I feel I can detach myself from the outcome of the election. So my question for you would be, how can greater involvement on campaigns and greater political activism, how can that actually reduce some of the anxiety about the election? When people feel that they have done their part in contributing to that outcome.
So I'll go first. Thank you for getting it all done. So here's what I think and why I think it's important to get involved. One, you kind of understand, there's this expression of how the sausage is made, right? I'm sure you learned a lot about politics, how it works, who does it, who makes the decision about it, in a way that when you're watching it on TV or in TikTok, you don't actually quite understand how a flyer is getting made, as our panelists talked about. Who's designing what's the message? You see, as you get involved, you know what does targeted messaging mean. You help understand why we're targeting that particular group. What messages are we sending that particular group? What expectation? Because then when you're talking about campaigning and organizing, you're talking about numbers. Somebody has done a poll, as you heard earlier, about your particular group, age, demographics. There's data on all of that information. What you get in your TikTok feed, as you all aware, is designed around a poll that's already done on you. And so I think getting involved and understand how the sausage is made, how an actual person get elected, and it could be actually somebody in your council seat, somebody next door. Congress isn't always talking about what your roads look like or who's going to be on your school board. That's something that's done locally. But just understanding the mechanics of politics will get you in terms of involvement and participation. You've got the power in your hand. You make the decision. So I'll let my colleagues add.
I will second my admiration for you in your activism. I will tell you, closer, sorry. I will tell you that I started volunteering on campaigns when I was very young. I was in high school and college. I was deeply engaged in the political process. And my experience of doing this for, I don't want to say this, it's almost 30 years. I had a full head of hair when I started. So the more you personally invest through your activity in an election, the more you are able to persuade. The more you knock on a door, the easier it gets to knock on the next door. And you said that you feel like you've done your part. And I will say to you, it's not just your part at knocking at the door. It's how you communicate with your friends and family. Because you gather from that activity a certain persuasion ability, because somebody will contradict your statement. You will say, I'm here to support candidate X. I believe ABC about them, and you should support them too. And somebody's going to naturally say, and I'm sure you've had this experience, well, I don't, and I believe otherwise. And you engage in a dialogue. And too often, I think that's the part that scares all of us, is that dialogue, that conversation. I've experienced this in my own personal life. I didn't really want to talk to that guy at my house that day. I didn't want to get into a fight with him. So we kind of are risk averse. But the other thing that you can do, and you just got the most valuable experience in doing it, is next time you run for office yourself. And there is nothing preventing anybody in this room, unless you're a convicted felon, and actually, you can see a convicted felon could run pretty effectively.
That's no impediment anymore.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that guardrail's off. But you can run for office yourself, and I'm not talking about running for president, but run for the school board, run for something. There are organizations and apparatus to help a new candidate get started. There are new candidate campaign schools that are run by both parties. And I don't think there's anything more empowering of an experience. I speak from personal experience, having run for office twice and now having run from office perpetually and never do it again. I will tell you that it is an empowering moment, and you just got the on-the-job training.
Well, it's great that you were doing the work. I've been out canvassing myself, knocking on doors. I've been text messaging people in North Carolina and Georgia. You know, we had you talked about fear. You know, people, what do you do with that fear about the upcoming results? We used to have a saying in movement days, action overcomes fear. You want to deal with your fear? Do something. Don't sit and stew in it. And there's 6 days left to do something. You don't have to sit at home and stew about, oh my God, what's going to happen in 6 days. go make something happen between now and those 6 days, and we aren't done yet. We aren't done yet. I remember I ran for office also out on the East End quite a number of years ago, and just in the last week of the campaign, somebody said to me, "Oh, now it's kind of almost over. It's kind of winding down, right?" No, it's not winding down. Now is when the sprint. Now is when you're really put out in order to put your chest through that finished tape. So, go get them.
Thank you.
Right, hi. My question is for Michael, and I wanted to tackle one of the main points that he made here about Trump being an arm of the ruling class and how he's controlled by a bunch of moneyed elites and whatever. Wouldn't you say that Kamala Harris, who has gotten billions of dollars in donations to her campaign, wouldn't she be submissive to the same ruling class?
That's a very good question. And yes, indeed, I believe that Kamala Harris is part of the ruling class of this country, and she gets her billions of dollars out of the same pool of class money. There's no doubt about it. But the ruling class is not one monolithic thing. Kamala Harris is not a fascist. And if you think that that is an important difference, take that seriously. Now, to bring it back to Hitler, my father was in the Communist Party in Germany in 1928, and he left the Communist Party in Germany in 1928 because there was a debate about who was the main enemy to the working class in Germany in 1928. There were two views. One view was it was Hitler, and the other view was it was Social Democrats and the liberals, because the Social Democrats were leading the working class astray. And the German Communist Party said that their main problem was the Social Democrats and not Hitler. And my dad left the Communist Party over that. And he taught me that when he was 83 years old, and I was already, almost long in the tooth myself. Yes, Kamala Harris is part of the ruling class. The ruling class is going to rule no matter who wins this election until you have a socialist revolution, and that's a long way off from now. So don't think that just because Kamala Harris is getting her money from Wall Street that she's the same thing as Donald Trump. Fascism is not the same thing as what Kamala Harris is about. That's my answer to you. I hope that helps.
Can I add something onto that? You hit on probably one of the most important problems in our politics, which is money in politics. The Citizens United, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, only happened when a Republican-appointed majority on the court was able to do something that they had long waited to do, which is to have unrestrained, unmitigated funds flow into politics. This is one thing we know for sure, is that money has a big effect on politics. And the current justices on the Supreme Court are the majority, deeply committed to upholding Citizens United. I'll go one step even further. There was a bill in Congress. I'm very, very familiar with this bill because I had a lot to do with constructing it and promoting it. It's called the For the People Act. It actually received the lofty title of H.R. 1, House Bill 1, the first priority of the new Congress, and Senate Bill 1. It was the most important priority, which was the effort to secure democracy. And a key component of that was eliminating Citizens United and requiring campaign disclosures instead of allowing just unmitigated money to flow into elections. The effort to move that bill failed because of one senator, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. We could have a conversation about Joe Manchin for a while. But that bill passed in the House of Representatives, and it was only time it passed was when there was a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives, and it did not come close to making its way to Donald Trump's desk when he was president. We introduced that bill 5 times. So money in politics, if that's something that disturbs you and you think about the ruling class, you can thank the Republican Party and their efforts to not only uphold Citizens United, but to promote it.
Thank you.
Okay, from one car guy to another, I've got a 57 Chevy, and I...
Oh, wow. My favorite of all time. My
Yeah,
absolute
indeed.
favorite of all time.
I'd like to drill down on your Teamster buddy a little bit, all right? And what he thinks and why he thinks it, because I think that that's very important in terms of being able to reach these people. I watch MSNBC because I think they give me facts, they support the facts, and they'll very often put them in historical context. So as a former historian, I think that's very important. I think that's where answers often lie, and most people don't know any history anymore for a whole lot of reasons which we don't need to get into. On the other hand, I'll watch Newsmax and Fox occasionally because, well, you know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. All right. We have an associate who will be voting for Trump. I call her and address her as my favorite fascist. I asked her recently, what is it that you don't like about Kamala? And she said, everything. And I said, can you tell me one thing? Crickets. And I said, anything, just tell me anything that you don't like. Maybe I'll support your position, just give me some idea. Again, nothing. And that's the basic problem, that these people get very different news than we do. When I look at something on Fox...
Excuse me, sir, can I just ask you, because we have a student also, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
And the question is, how do we reach these people?
I mean, that's kind of look, I've been working on campaigns my entire life. I think one answer is what Thomas mentioned earlier, is pressing the flesh and actually getting out there and talking to people. And that was my experience at the Trump rally a few weeks ago, was having conversations with people and letting them talk and letting them explain what their point of view is the most revealing opportunity to persuade. Because we are in a place of heightened emotional states, all of us. I'm deeply emotional about the election and its outcomes. We all are. The other side is as well. I don't know, I'm sure there are some folks in here who are on both sides of the aisle, I would imagine. I think this is a much more personal decision, and ginning up the rhetoric on either side when you have a few minutes to watch TV. And the fact of the matter is that most people are not watching TV to get their news. People are getting, this generation in this room, primarily getting their news on TikTok. I mean, let me ask that question to this crowd. How many people here, students, find their primary information source about this current political environment in the election from MSNBC and CNN? It's got to be more about personal persuasion and conversation. And I think that's really the key. And that's an impossible tall order when you're talking about 300 million people in a country. I think we are ascribing a little bit too much value and weight to the effectiveness of media. But when media don't show up, like the Washington Post making the decision and the Los Angeles Times making the decision not to endorse a presidential candidate for the first time in their history, it's a confirmation in a way. So, I mean, I don't have an answer here. The only answer I can tell you is that when you have a deep personal conversation with somebody, you can tell them what's really on your mind, what's really weighing on you. It changes the subject a little bit.
I would just add that I think it's best to have those conversations in the course of struggle. You're fighting for housing, you're fighting for this, fighting for that, and in the course of that common fight, you have these kinds of conversations about who are your friends and who are your enemies.
Ready? Okay. I have my degrees from Hofstra. I am a union member of the United Federation of Teachers, the New York State United Teachers, and the American Federation of Teachers. And I was at the AFL-CIO Constitutional Convention that you held in August to endorse various candidates and proposals that will be coming up in this election. I just want the group to know that although they endorse certain things, within the union, there is still buzz as to Trump versus Kamala Harris, whatever, and so on. My question, which doesn't come up very often, is do you feel she's strong enough to address international things such as what's happening in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in Iran, and whether, do you think she can do it?
You're just asking me personally? Look, I worked in the United States Senate for a long time, and I was in the House of Representatives for a long time, and she was in the United States Senate. I got to know Senator Harris pretty well. She's a very serious and thoughtful person. I think that when you have a member of Congress, they are nearly constantly deluged with all of the national security information that you can imagine. I can only imagine how much more information she's privy to as vice president. Vice president of the United States is not an insignificant role in international diplomacy and foreign affairs at all. I have no doubts about Vice President Harris and her ability to engage on the global stage. The job of a senator is at times a diplomatic one. I've traveled internationally with senators, and I can tell you that those conversations are real and substantial, and that work is real and substantial, and she's vastly more qualified to engage in foreign policy than a washed-up businessman. Mm-hmm. And I think those concerns are mostly unfounded, but I do have questions about where those concerns derive from, because I will say this. I think if her name was Mr. Harris, I think that nobody would be questioning that a former United States Senator and Vice President of the United States doesn't have the bona fides to manage foreign policy.
Okay.
Quite right, quite right.
Yep.
Onika, you look like you were going to say something.
No, I'm yes. And so, same sentiments. I think you said it well. I think there would have been absolutely no question if that was Mr. Harris, whether or not we were questioning her qualifications. It is very clear what a strong woman that she proudly is. And I cannot possibly imagine the things that come before her that she has to make decisions as that the average person has not even thought about. And so I think this goes to how we pick candidates, that we pick and trust people who go and make decisions based on values that are concrete and that make sense, and that are thinking about us at the end of the day, right? You want somebody who you very rarely know what's coming before them any given day. The amount of bills that pass before any particular senator any given day, you want to know it's coming from a core that they care about you. And so she has demonstrated that over the course of her many jobs, even working at McDonald's, that she cares about people. And so I think that's a priority. I think this country needs to step out of this gender conversation and start talking about the most qualified person for the job.
Good. Thank you. We have.
Hi, thank you for speaking with us today. My name is Ethan. My question is kind of similar to the previous one, I'd say. What would you say to people who feel that neither candidate aligns with them particularly well, and they're either considering voting for a third party or potentially not voting at all? I've had people that I know in real life that are in the same that are in that position. I would even say to some degree I was in that position. I did vote for one of the two candidates, but what would you say to someone that might feel obligated to vote for a third party or not at all?
So let me start this, because do we all have people in our families that we don't like? Do you all have people in your families that you don't agree with? Are they in your family? Do you generally come from the same set of genes and DNA? So I think what tends to happen, we get caught up in this space where somebody's giving us information, telling us that your elected official needs to agree with everything you say, and they need to be able to do this. That's not how people work, right? And so you will learn that as a person. Like 4 years ago, you're not the same person that you are today. Who you are, you've grown, you've learned, you've experienced, and it changes and develops into who you are. The question is, who are you? Who's your character? Your character is what's going to carry you and lead you and guide you. And that's where you want people to be making decisions. This about like and don't like. You all know we had best friends in kindergartens that we probably don't even talk to now, right? Isn't that how it works with people? People kind of... and so we shouldn't be hanging on. And I don't want to, I understand this debate in terms of like, neither one of them, you pick the worst devil. I think that's the conversation. That's designed to not get you involved. Let's be real. It's designed to make sure that you decide, you take your power and dilute it. For you not to get involved in any of the candidates before you, is a way of you not exercising your power. If you think you can do better than it, then you go run for president and senator and Congress. But at the end of the day, go pick somebody who actually says, here are my top, here's who I am, here's what I can do for people. Not just for you. You want somebody who's going to do for people across the board, because that's going to help you be the kind of leader and elect a leader that's thinking about people. I just want to add that.
I'd like to add something to this, which is, in the United States, we operate on a two-party system. We do. Yep. There are parliamentary systems in other countries where third parties play a critical role. And in the United States, historically, thank you, Dr. Parati, for teaching me all about this, there are party realignments where parties morph into new parties. The Democratic Party of the Civil War is not the Democratic Party of the potentially next Civil War, God forbid. But the moment to make a statement about party changes is to think about whether or not this two-party system really serves our needs anymore. And there are a lot of conversations about that. One of the paths to take is to encourage states and municipalities to engage in ranked choice voting. And some people feel that that's the pathway to greater party diversity. However, I will say this to you, and I would say this to anybody who listens. If you were to ask me, why shouldn't I vote for Jill Stein? I think you should ask that question to Hillary Clinton. And I think you should ask yourself, why should I vote for Jill Stein? Why should I find a third-party candidate? The question about neither candidate fully representing you, does that third party also represent you entirely? Does that candidate really embody everything that you believe in? And will that candidate gather at some point in a polling place when you are voting or by mail, however you vote, there has got to be some sort of pragmatic, practical decision-making process in your mind about what the value of that action of your vote is. And there is no universe where that third-party candidate is going to be effective. There has not been an effective third-party candidate since Ross Perot. And in this election in particular, where we have two candidates who are polling so closely together, when you ask yourself, what are the values that matter to you and a candidate? Is it reproductive freedom? Is it the treatment of migrants in this country? Is it economic opportunity? Whatever your issue is, whatever it is, I'm sure that one of the two candidates that are so close to the line has articulated a state that a place that probably does get at what you want to be represented by.
So we have one more student up there. I hesitate
Thank
to
you.
end the conversation without asking you to.
I just have a quick question about Harris. So you guys were talking about her internationally, and I completely agree with you. Like, she's probably more qualified than Trump. I don't think Appalachia Vance really has great international qualifications either. But you talked about she had all this information, right, as vice president, and she also had more information when she was in Congress, right? So we kind of see how internationally things have escalated under Biden, right? I think that there is a question of whether or not, regardless of qualification, how she will, like, I don't know, she hasn't done anything within 4 years. Maybe that's just because Biden hasn't allowed her, but it still doesn't look great for her. And I think, like, the loudest ignorant rhetoric on, like, the Republican side, we can always quickly dismiss, right? Like, it's very clear, like, they're doing, like, gender stuff, right? And we can very quickly dismiss that. But then I think there's an underlying point when we dismiss that and we're like, we've taken care of that. There's an underlying point that we didn't get to, which is, like, she did have this time for, like, 4 years. I think, like, that needs to be addressed, even though she is more qualified, right? Why in 4 years has things escalated to this point? And why, if she gets into, right, the office, she takes a couple of people, maybe she didn't love everyone from Biden's administration, right? But you can't tell me that there aren't a few people that she liked. Why would that turnover, right, mean anything different? And why would we want that versus, even though he is a fascist, right, completely, right? But if you're thinking in your head, right, like, shoot, World War III is about to jump off, like, this is very, very scary. I think that's a lot of the times where you see people leaning towards this fascism, right? Like, you want to be with something that's comfortable. You want to be with something that's Machiavellian, right? And he's very much that. And it's very easy for us to be very logical here in a college, right? And talk about it like this, but that isn't what's going to, like, hit people in Suffolk. That's not what's going to hit people in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham. Like, it's very, very, we're very, very good at, like, the complete BS we can get through, but sometimes underlying that BS, I feel like we don't kind of address these people's concerns, even though they're saying it in such a weird, messed up way. And I wonder, like, how could we as a party, right, do a better job of that?
Well, I think the question about the vice president's role in war making and decisions about national security, I'd just say look at Article 2 of the United States Constitution and try to figure out what role a vice president really would have, what she could have been doing over the past 4 years, number one. Number two, I think the ascribing of blame to a United States president for foreign conflicts that emerge, the war in Ukraine, the conflict in Gaza, that's a really kind of sticky, complicated question to offer, and it's also, you know, I could never buy into the idea that Vladimir Putin would not have attacked Ukraine if Donald Trump were president. That's a great line for him, but Vladimir Putin also annexed Crimea. Vladimir Putin has been waiting for a moment where he felt he had an opportunity, and it is not because Joe Biden was president. Believe me, it wasn't because Joe Biden was president. The idea that Kamala Harris would have been able to step in as vice president, I just want to go back. And the last time we had a vice president who was deeply engaged in war making was Dick Cheney, and we had a lot of opinions about that. So I don't know. I leave that to my panel. I don't think it is really a rational or fair criticism to say we had 4 years to fix the border, to make world peace, international world peace, and resolve the tattered economy left by the previous administration as vice president, who's constitutionally obligated only to break a tie vote in the Senate and to be there in case the president dies.
All right, thank you. I hate to bring this to a close, but I fear we must. Thank you, everyone, for coming, students for your great questions, members of the community, and to our panelists, thanks very much.